Welcome to CPG, the Cannabis Packaged Goods Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Thanks so much for joining the Cannabis Packaged Goods Podcast today, Keith. I'm really excited to have you here and really excited to learn more about Sunderstorm.
Appreciate being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start by talking about your transition from Wall Street to cannabis back in 2015. I think it's a pretty unique story, and would love to hear, from your perspective, what drove that decision. What your background kind of can bring to the cannabis industry as well.
Sure. So there was a little gap from the time I left Wall Street and had a very fortunate chance to travel to different countries and really became a fan of plant medicine. So I traveled a lot through Asia, and their traditional medicine is really plant medicine. It's not Western pharmaceutical medicine. And so it really intrigued me, the fact that plants have this kind of ingenious connection with humans, and let's try to use a natural product if we can in place of a synthetic product when possible. I'm not here totally critiquing Western medicine. It's fantastic at emergencies. It's just not great at maintenance and body maintenance. And I think cannabis is kind of a regulator for many people, plant medicine, and so that really is what drew me in. In 2015, my business partner and I, we were both have been friends for decades. He was looking at algae and extracting oil from algae. You could think omega-3s on the shelf of Whole Foods that are extracted from algae. And then he began to look that extraction equipment was coming into cannabis, and a light bulb went off in his head. So his name is Cameron Clark. And so we basically sat down and, kind of looked at what we wanted to do in the cannabis space and focused on basically creating, high-level branded products and getting them on the shelves through self-distribution. And that's the business that we built today.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you're absolutely right. I mean, extraction back in 2015, extraction was still pretty early stages, I think, and you're starting to see more of these categories of products emerging and different methods of extraction. So I could see how you guys kind of connected the dots there, and obviously the plant-based medicine angle as well. So coming from the world of Wall Street, one of the things in the cannabis industry that I think has changed quite significantly is access to capital. Kind of from your background and the way you see things, and maybe in your prior life, how do you see is capital or access to capital in a place that's great with the cannabis industry? Is there still room to improve? How do you look at that?
I would say it needs improvement. So I think early on there was a ton of access to capital for Canadian listed companies coming from kind of Canadian investors. So that drove the first wave of cannabis investing. And then there was basically a drought of capital through 2019 for, in Canada and the United States. And then basically, kind of beginning, middle of 2020, the markets kind of bottomed out and improved. But the reality is most of that capital are going to the large MSOs. So they're getting capital efficiency, which is a massive differentiator from, smaller and medium-sized companies. I would say that capital for private companies is still challenging to come by. You need to be kind of a market leader, and then I think you have access. But for the broad base of companies, it's challenging.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Canadian LPs. Do you think that federal legalization in Canada drove that initial wave of investment?
100%. Because it was legitimate. You could actually invest in these companies. What was challenging for Canada is that they have the Toronto Stock Exchange, which is kind of like our New York Stock Exchange. It's for bigger companies. Many institutions will only invest in New York Stock Exchange. They're not going to invest in the OTC market here in the US, and it's the same in Canada. So once again, you found that the big companies that, got access to capital and really were rallied probably beyond their fair value. And other companies, didn't get access to any capital. So it really is a world of, have and have nots.
Yeah, and with a sense of federal legalization on the horizon here in the U.S., although you never know, how things go. I'm sure we'd see a similar wave, maybe some exuberance in the capital markets around the category, but hopefully on a state-by-state basis, as we see markets like New York start to open up, you're starting to see, more investment come in. But I agree. I mean, I think it's got a long way to go, but it's steadily improving, but, the federal overhang certainly doesn't help. So your jump into the cannabis category, has the industry matched, any of your expectations? Has it turned out a little bit better than you thought, or maybe not so good?
It has turned out so much more complex than I could have ever envisioned. My partner and I kind of laugh that this is like a 6-level matrix of decision making. The fact it's not federally legal leads to challenges, in real estate leases. Tax structure with 280E complicates and means that many of us have a pretty complex organizational structure. All the way from, having it be, still, a cash-based system, although that is absolutely changing at the moment. All these things just add up to incredible complexity. And, we've been operating in the city of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles has had challenges processing licensing, at the rate that the industry needs. So there's all these kind of supply-demand issues that affect companies like ourselves. But, we currently have about 240 employees. So it's, we're providing a ton of jobs. And I feel like some days we're swimming upstream on the regulatory front, despite the fact that we're giving, a ton of employment to people.
Yeah. Complex is the best word for it, I think. It is such a complex industry with fragmentation, all those things that you hit on, state-by-state approaches. It's interesting you mentioned LA. Just this week here in June of 2021, I saw that California kind of passed a revised budget, and they allocated $100 million for the cannabis industry, and a significant portion of that is earmarked for Los Angeles. It's earmarked for a number of counties, but the delay and the provisional licenses to full licenses, I think, was called out specifically. So hopefully we start to see some change there, for you and for others in the market, and just some improvement. But California's one state, and I know you guys operate in a number of states in a variety of ways, and every state is so different. It hits the complexity. Yeah.
California really is the trendsetter.
Right.
And, you would think that, we would really have dialed in our system. But it's a challenge. It's an ongoing process. I know that the state and city people realize that there are issues. So hopefully we can all work together and, kind of get it moved along so we can have annual rather than provisional licenses.
Right. Yeah. It's great to see them, taking a approach where they're trying to invest to try and fix some of this stuff. There's a lot of states out there that really kind of sign, governor signs it and it kind of some framework gets built, but they're not really reinvesting in it. And I think with obviously the tax revenue coming into markets like California, it makes a lot of sense to continue to reinvest and to help businesses. We're all like businesses in this space, trying to succeed, and that's one of California's jobs, or a state's job, is to support the businesses that are operating, especially when you have something like 240 jobs. That's an incredible amount of jobs you guys have created. So,
for sure.
Speaking of, Thunderstorm, I really would want to start to dive into your brand portfolio. Kana Edibles, I think is one of the very notable brands within your portfolio. Yep, on your shirt there, I love it. And you also have some other brands as well, including a vapor pen brand, Wind, and you've got the Nano 5 brand that produces tinctures. And so, just kind of, taking a look at that portfolio, what drives kind of the decisions around, investing in edibles and vapor pens and tinctures, and how do you think about other categories? Are you guys happy with these categories, and where do you start at Sunderstorm?
Yeah, that's a great question. We started off with kind of the mindset that it was such a new industry. It was hard to know what was going to stick. So we really had a lot of SKUs, and then over time we've kind of dialed back our SKUs actually. Our focus is without a doubt Kana gummies. where we have probably, we certainly have the widest variety of flavors and ratios of any gummy company. So we're really heavily oriented toward Kana. We're one of the top edibles in the state, and we're taking that product to new states. But as we mentioned kind of at the top of the thing, we do self-distribution. So we actually have our own fleet of vans, our own fulfillment centers, both in the LA area and the Bay Area, that can accommodate going to the state. And I guess one of our underlying business principles is that as a CPG company, you want to try to touch your customer with as many points as you can to build that relationship. I mean, while we live in a digital world, I think business is fundamentally personal. And so, we manufacture our own product. We don't white label. We then have our own distribution hub, our own salespeople, our own field reps that run around. So in some ways, we're a B2B. We sell wholesale to dispensaries and delivery services across California. But at the end of the day, we have to build a relationship with the consumer to let them know what our brand stands for. So by controlling distribution, we feel we've got an edge on touching the B2B client on a regular basis, and having our own, field reps allows us to do, demos and different events, so we can begin to build a loyal following on the B2C. So I think any CPG company has to kind of divide their focus between B2B and B2C, and have some tools in their arsenal to develop both at the same time.
Yeah, great point. One of the things as a CPG company, having that touch point with the consumer is often challenging for any CPG company in any industry, even beyond cannabis. How do you guys see, being in California, there are opportunities for a direct-to-consumer model. Obviously, that's quite complex, and there's licenses associated with that. But I have seen some brands, come to market and try and put up a website and work through a potentially a delivery network, or building out their own delivery network to have that touch point with the consumer. Is that something that may be in the cards for Sunderstorm, or do you guys like the strictly CPG, don't want to get into retail, no matter if it's direct consumer or brick and mortar?
I would say that our focus currently is definitely staying in the B2B markets. We're here to really support our dispensaries and delivery services that have been kind of loyal Kana fans and help them grow their business. We do have a buy now button on our website, so we are basically working with some local providers. So I think, from our perspective, we want to offer the consumer as many choices as they can. I do think for many people that cannabis is new, and there's a lot of education that needs to be learned. And going into a store and talking with trained bud tenders is a great way to kind of get education that you can't get on a buy now button. I think if you know what you want and you're kind of going to do a buy repeat, the buy now button is great. If you want to explore, new products and new categories, going into a shop is a great way. So, at Sunderstorm, we really try to have our salespeople go in and do bud tender training, particularly on the more complex, nano products that are not kind of straightforward and simple, but require some education.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So, speaking of consumer education, and talking about Kana and the gummies, I believe you have two kind of different variations of Kana gummies. I mean, multiple flavors, but you have more traditional gummies and you have some fast onset gummies. Is that accurate?
It is. So we actually consider we have like 4 different buckets for gummies. And again, we're predominantly a gummy company. Our classic is kind of a regular, not nano. So it's a little slower release. It's going to be 45 minutes, to an hour for onset. It's going to have a longer duration. And it's a little bit cheaper price point. So that's kind of entry for a lot of people. We are the leader in nano edibles. We were the first licensed THC company in the country to have a nano product on the shelf back in 2016. We introduced nano to the California edibles market about 2 years ago. and is a significant portion of our business today. Nano is this complex thing, but you can kind of boil it down into two functional things, which is rapid onset, 15 to 20 minutes. So you're not waiting, a long time for that product to kick in. That allows for better dosing. It means you're not doubling up before you know where you are in your journey, which I think we probably have all had an experience on at some point in time. So the rapid onset, I think, is a great feature. And then with Nano, it's also higher bioavailability. So it's, my analogy is it's not how much vitamin C you take in the morning, it's how much vitamin C gets in your bloodstream. That's all that matters. And the vast majority of vitamin C is wasted, through your system. So maybe 30% actually get into your bloodstream. That's one of the reasons why there's such high milligrams for vitamin C, is because of the low bioavailability. So what Nano does, it kind of tricks the body into absorbing the THC and the CBD. So there's a much higher level that gets into your bloodstream. So you don't need as strong of a milligram content in the gummy or the tincture, because more of it's going to get into your bloodstream. So it's both faster onset and higher bioavailability. And we really think that a good chunk of the cannabis market is going to head in the direction of Nano, because it just makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, the edibles category, you said it really well. Like, everyone's had that experience, and I think that coupled with people new to the category coming to try cannabis for the first time, there may be some apprehension about having a chocolate or a brownie or a gummy that might be just too much. And I feel like the fast onset and what you guys are doing with Nano, rapid onset, the bioavailability, that makes a lot of sense, and changing kind of perceptions around that stuff, and just overall better experience for new, or maybe even people with experience that just want to try or have that faster onset, not wait. And so I think I agree. I think it's got to be the future of the category, and I think it comes down potentially to like consumer education. So with Nano, and you mentioned earlier, having your delivery and being able to work with, customers and interface with your B2B, but, you can connect to the consumers in some ways. How much on the education are you guys doing to try and raise awareness of things like Nano?
I would say that's it's a big challenge for us, right? Because it is complicated and, requires kind of understanding kind of how it works. So we actually have a bud tender training platform that we use. Certain shops will agree to allow us to go in and send links to bud tenders, and they basically have a 15-minute kind of video with a test at the end, and they pass the test, and the bud tender will get a sample of one of the products that they can order. Nano again comes in our edibles and in our tinctures. So both in-store training for bud tenders and, kind of the beginning of online education targeted at bud tenders is really how we're focused on it today. It's a difficult kind of message to send out in the B2C world, because, if you have an ad somewhere, it has to be simple and to the point, and it's, you can't have a whole lecture on a billboard. That's not going to fly. So we are really relying on the shops and the bud tenders that that love Kana and like to sell Kana, educating the audience. And when someone tries Nano for the first time and they have that positive experience, once they have the experiential feel of what it is like to have rapid onset and kind of a more trailing off journey, there's just a certain segment of the audience that's going to keep coming back for that time and time again and are sold. But getting them to try for the first time is challenging.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it'll be a matter of time before, consumers are all educated. So many edibles, are marketed all different ways, but so much of like differentiation that before things like, Nano and fast onset, it was really, microdose, kind of 5 milligram or 2.5 milligram. And that was the way to say, well, start low, go slow, have a 2.5 milligram, maybe have another, but you're not going to overdo it. That was kind of, I think early on, 2015, 2016, you saw that. And I think that, it's been, a number of years since then. So I could see how consumers, one that didn't exist before, like the low dose kind of edible was always, especially in the medical, you'd have even 100 milligram edibles. Mm-hmm. And then you saw that kind of trend towards more of the low dose. And now I think the next trend is going to be, rapid onset. And I think it is, consumer education and getting the word out. And the bud tenders do command so much mind share for a consumer when you walk in. Even myself, who's, been in the space, for 10 years at this point, I still ask when I walk in, what's new? What do you guys like? Just to kind of get some feedback. And so, educating the bud tender and, having that bud tender be a conduit to the consumer is, I think, a great strategy.
Yeah, and then I think there's the next wave of minor cannabinoids, right? So I think the rapid onset is a trend that's kind of catching on now, and now we're beginning to find out a little bit more about CBN, which is also targeting sleep, CBG, targeting inflammation and other conditions. So I would say that our other kind of product category that we have is different ratios. So we have high CBD, low THC. We've got 4 parts CBD to 1 part THC. We have a 1-to-1. And then we have a sleep gummy that actually includes CBN, CBD, and THC. So we're exploring minor cannabinoids. Clearly, the U.S. government has not done a great job allowing university research. So we really have science supporting this, but that's beginning to open up. There's definitely been a loosening of those constraints. So I imagine that a few years down the road, we're going to have much more information on the true scientific efficacy of these minor cannabinoids. And then companies like ourselves will then take that research and create new products that will be healthy for our consumers.
Yeah, which brings me to your tinctures and Nano. Is it Nano 5? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, and some of those ratios, and I know you put them on the bottles, but you also talk about kind of the effects, so to speak, in a sense of like you have tranquility, like good for sleep and all of that. Do you find with the consumer, I would imagine that's pretty powerful because learning ratios, kind of back to that consumer education, it's tricky, right? I've been into a cannabis retailer with my father, and he's looking for some pain relief items, and I was talking about ratios, and I was trying to explain how it works, and it was just, you could tell, just too much information for him. So do you guys, putting that on your labels, this type of kind of positioning for your products, have you found that to be pretty beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, sleep is a massive category. And so we've really, targeted sleep via our Tranquility Gummy and our Tranquility Nano 5. I'll just talk about Nano 5 for a minute. So it's named Nano 5 because the onset time is as quick as 5 minutes. It tends to be more like 5 to 15 minutes. It's a spray that you spray under your tongue. You hold it, it's called a sublingual. Lingual is your tongue. So you hold it under your tongue for 2 minutes, which seems like a lifetime, like brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. And basically what happens is about 80% of the THC and CBD actually are absorbed directly into the bloodstream and bypass the entire digestive tract. So when THC is processed in the digestive tract, it becomes a certain chemical compound. When it's smoked, and it's basically gets in your bloodstream through your lungs, or sublingual, it actually has a slightly different chemical nature. So, having the Nano 5 spray is like an alternative to smoking, without actually smoking, which a lot of people in today's world, want to avoid. They've never been a smoker. They want the effects of THC and CBD, but they don't want, to have a smoking habit. So, it's more of a medical product, and we've got, a number of people in different conditions that are using it for, medical products. So I would say, our gummies are more, probably a little more adult use with also a chunk of medical. I would say the Nano 5 is, much more predominantly medical, people that are really coming in with a condition. So we have the different ratios everywhere from high THC, high THC, low CBD, all the way to, a 1-to-1 and then the reverse. And you're right, ratios don't sell. They don't make a lot of sense. Functionality, kind of sells. The challenging on that is that everybody responds to THC and CBD differently. Our genetic makeup is different. And as a result, you might put something functional on the bottle that may not necessarily be true, maybe different for you than it is for me based on our genetic makeup. So we're trying to basically work to kind of solve that last piece of the puzzle on how different people react genetically to different cannabinoids.
Yeah, and is that related to the DNA product line that you have?
Yes, we just launched 3 new sublingual tinctures called Nano 5 DNA in conjunction with a company, Endocanna, which has a kind of 23andMe test kit where you basically send in your DNA and they process it and will give you feedback on how your body's going to respond to THC and CBD, and then recommend some different ratios and products that might work well for you. And so, this is the beginning of what's going to be, kind of personalization with cannabis as a medicine. I think it's still fairly early on. Like I say, we don't have mounds and mounds of scientific research that, hasn't been distorted by government bodies. But, it's I think a first legitimate attempt at trying to see where how the genetic structure, if we can fit them into a few different categories, we could then design products that are going to work better for them. So we're just launching this today. It isn't fully out in the stores, but we've been working on this for actually a couple of years.
Very cool. I mean, it's I can see all the benefits related to medical consumption and even adult use, for wellness or even a recreational experience. If you had it just dialed in to like what you like, I think would be pretty powerful. And you're absolutely right. It does seem that everyone has a little bit of a different experience. There's so many factors to it that dialing it in has always been the great challenge. So it's great that you guys are pushing towards that. I think this is one of the most fascinating things about the category. It's just like it's been around for a long time, cannabis consumption, even before, legal markets, whether, medical or adult use. And people have been consuming cannabis for millennia in some form, and there's still room to innovate and to try things and to dial it in. That's, I know what keeps me excited, in a big way.
For sure. And then I think when you look through it through the lens of CPG, I think 2 things really stand out that a brand like ours and and our fellow brands out there, really are working on is consistency, right? You have a Coca-Cola on the East Coast, it's the same as a Coca-Cola on the West Coast. So allowing consumers to be in different parts of the country and have that same consistent dosage and texture. Then the second is really, to win the trust of the consumer who's going to choose Kana because they know that it's a consistent, dosing product. So it's about us getting the message of kind of the better qualities of our product and having consumers engage with that. And, I think B2B works much more on kind of a logical front, but B2C advertising is much more emotional. So how do you convey, the positive traits of Kana that's going to cause an emotional, positive connection with the consumer? And then, of course, we're constrained on using Facebook and all sorts of different digital media platforms because we're a bad cannabis company. So all of which is changing. We will get there. It's all one step at a time. But it is exciting to figure out how to get that message across that a CPG company needs to do to build a national brand.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts is the fragmentation in these different states, and for both those reasons, right? Consistency, and you need that large footprint to build like a big national brand and drive that awareness, and then you have the limitations of marketing. Coca-Cola can put ads everywhere. Unfortunately, the cannabis industry, you're quite limited on where you can advertise and market your products. I notice you guys are in more states than California. And you're also, I believe, have some products in Canada. How do you guys look at that and like the structure? Are you guys working with licensed producers in those markets? Are you guys directly on the ground in those markets? Has it been challenging to scale in this industry?
Well, the first challenge we have that no other industry has is that all product needs to be grown, manufactured, sold, and consumed in a single state. So everything in California is grown, manufactured here, which means we can't ship across state lines. So we have to open up and replicate our whole production facility in these new states. So that is extremely, challenging and also, has a capital expenditure component to it as well. So this quarter, we've launched in Colorado, Massachusetts, and Nevada. We've chosen these states because they're each adult use states that are $1 billion or bigger. Colorado is clearly the number 2 market behind California. Massachusetts has been a little newer, but is a really big, deep market already for adult use. And, Nevada had a little downtick with COVID because of tourism, but it's actually coming back super strong today. So for us to have to justify setting up a brand new end-to-end production facility, the market just simply has to be big enough for it to be worthwhile. We have to be able to sell enough products. So we're excited to be in these states. We're in about 10% of the dispensaries in each of these states after only being open for a couple of months. So we feel like we're on a good trajectory. Each of these states, we really set up our own facility and manage production ourselves. We do have a local license partner in a couple of them. Canada is really our only licensing agreement that is currently active, where we've actually trained a local partner in Canada who then is manufacturing under our guidelines and kind of, quality control. And so it's a relatively new, I think the product just got on the shelves at the end of last quarter, at the end of the fourth quarter in 2020. So it's pretty new, but they're making some sales and progress. It's always this trade-off between a licensing deal like we've seen between brands and, maybe multi-state operators versus going in and doing it yourself and kind of controlling your intellectual property, but, having the challenge of bandwidth and capital, CapEx. So, each state we really look at in its uniqueness, and we'll make a determination on what's the best way to enter. But our goal is to be a national edibles brand. And, to do that, we've got to have a presence across the country.
Yeah, I can only imagine the CapEx costs that are required. But I can see how you get the benefits of some of the control of production. So a consumer that's in California that maybe goes to Las Vegas for a vacation and picks up the product, and it's the same experience. Canada is interesting. It's the restrictions. Every state has different restrictions in different ways, but Canada with their edibles is part of what they called their 2.0 cannabis, because when they first legalized federally, edibles weren't available. And there's some significant restrictions, like I believe a single package can only come in 10 milligrams. Which is quite different than, what we see in the U.S. While the suggested serving size generally is 10 milligrams, but you can buy a 100 milligram package, and get 10 gummies or however many, and that. So I imagine that was quite different experience for Sunderstorm, and I could see why you might license up there. Not to mention it's an entirely different country. Yes,
and so it's the limitation on what you can put in a package, and honestly, a lot of the expense comes in packaging, and so whether there's one gummy in there or 20 gummies in there, certain things have the same cost. So it really works against the consumer because it drives up costs ridiculously. Secondly, they don't really allow marketing, and so you can't have colorful packaging and what a typical CPG company would create, without that kind of two hands tied behind your back. So, marketing is really tricky, what you can and cannot do. And that's one of the reasons why we chose a local partner, because, they're on the ground there and have a better idea of what the regs are than we do in California.
Yeah, certainly different. Everything is pretty plain. I think a small logo, single color on the package, and then that packaging waste. Hopefully they change it at some point, because it just is not ideal for the category. Speaking of expansion, and you mentioned earlier, California is where many things start, and expand out from there. You guys looking at working with any others? You're starting to see some of these larger multi-state operators scaling up with, a footprint in some of these limited license markets that certainly aren't at the $1 billion threshold that you guys like, or some of those markets are getting there, medical and so on. We've seen some strategies where California brands have licensed their products with some of those organizations that might have some of the scale and some of the expertise to create that. Is that a strategy that you guys like, or is that would you prefer to go into those markets directly as a CPG brand?
It's a strategy that we're definitely in conversations on. I think it's difficult for a company to, set up operations in 20 states. It makes a lot more sense if you're going to do a licensing arrangement to do it with a company that's got a footprint across multiple states, so you can train once and have a bigger bang for the buck. So it's definitely something that we're considering, and definitely more companies are heading down that path.
Yeah. It seems like, you guys are in one of the most, if not the most competitive market there in California. And if you can build a brand there, it seems like in these limited license, kind of less competitive markets, you'd have some significant advantages, kind of trial by fire. And so I can see why the MSOs would look to brands like yours to kind of bring to those, instead of maybe trying to develop them, themselves directly.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I looked at the leading brands in California have had the most intense competition, and it forces you to raise your ball game, right? As a result of that, so I do feel that there's, a strong kind of desire for California brands across the country. California and probably New York, and maybe Miami set the stage for kind of fashion, music. And cannabis. I would say California definitely sets the standard, so people know that we have the best. Which is not to say that there's not significant progress being made in these other states as well. So it'll be very curious to see how California brands head east, and the MSOs that are based back east head west. I think that will be an exciting thing for cannabis fans to look to see how it evolves over the next couple years.
Yeah, it'll be really fun to watch how this all plays out. You're absolutely right. You see those California brands heading out there, and I feel like the MSOs are finally getting, involved in California, but in a very, light way. I'm generalizing. Some have more significant investments than others, certainly, but when you look at their overall investments in some of these other states, it seems like California is a very small percentage. So it'll be really fun to watch all of that. So as we wrap up here, what might your favorite Sunderstorm product be? And if it's like kids and you can't choose your favorite, I totally understand.
I love two products. My favorite would be our cranberry pomegranate 5 milligram sativa nano gummy. So there's 20 in a pack. They're 5 milligrams, rapid onset. If you're an edibles fan and you haven't tried, a nano, I would really strongly recommend trying this as your first product. We have it obviously in sativa, and then the indica is passion fruit. So if you're more of an indica type person, then the passion fruit nano would be great. Again, found in dispensaries throughout California, in Colorado, and now increasingly in Nevada. And I also, on the Nano 5 front, we have a product called Lucidity, which is 75% THC, 25% CBD with 5-HTP, which is a serotonin booster. And that is just, a small dose of that just kind of takes the edge off. And, I have friends that call that the happy juice. So it's, you can dose it really small doses, so it's super microdose. The Nano 5 is great for microdosing. So those would be my two favorite products, both of which are nano.
We'll have to look out for both of them. They sound amazing. And anything we can expect from Thunderstorm in the near term? Sounds like you guys are pretty plates are pretty full expanding into these new markets, but any new product lines or anything on the horizon?
We recently introduced a belt where each piece is 50 milligrams. It has perforations on it, so you can see where 10 milligrams would be per the regulations. And we introduced that for really the high dose consumer, so you don't have to eat, a ton of sugar and gummies to kind of get the milligram content you want. So look for the Kana belts if you're a high dose consumer and want to take a lot of milligrams with minimal kind of candy in between.
Fantastic. It sounds like you guys have a little something for everyone, and that makes a lot of sense to kind of people that are worried about all the sugar or the calorie consumption. Well, thanks so much, Keith. Really enjoyed this conversation. Love to kind of hear the story behind some of these Sunderstorm products and obviously your transition into the industry. We'll definitely look forward to all the success in the future as you guys move your products into every market that's out there.
Cy, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat with you.
Thanks for joining CPG, the Cannabis Packaged Goods Podcast. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.